first off, my thanks to the New York State Hockey Hall of Fame committee for this just fantastic honor. So thank you so much for that. Many of the inductees tonight I've either worked with or played against, and we've gotten to know each other so well for so many years, and it's just a tremendous honor to be recognized with all of you, so thank you for that. As we were preparing for this, and the number of conversations I had with Renee, like so many others have said, he said, don't be thanking too many people. People want to know about, they want to know about your journey, and that's what we'd like to hear. And so, I've always thought about just keep going forward. So after our conversation, I started thinking about way back when, and then how this journey has evolved. And sorry, Rennie, but my journey is all about the people that have helped me, and that's what this has been. I mean, I've had so many mentors along the way that as long as you were willing to listen and learn and try to do what they say, I think that's how you learn. That's how you get better. That's how you improve. And so, I have this indelible picture in my mind back when I was 4 years old. And I know when you're young, you don't remember a lot. But I was one of 9 kids. First 6 were boys, 2 girls and a boy. And I was born in International Falls, Minnesota, right up on the Canadian border, across the river from Fort Francis, Ontario. But when I was 4 years old, our family moved to Hibbing, Minnesota, about 100 miles south of there, still 200 miles north of Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I just never forget about my father building this hockey rink in the backyard, and my older brothers standing at the door watching, and then propping me up on a chair as I'm staring out the window, watching my father, and we all couldn't wait for the ice to be finished. It was just this anticipation. So hockey has been part of just about my entire life, and it's just been the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And so that started, and it was actually my oldest brother Tom who pushed all of us to play sports. He pushed us to get on the ice. He pushed us to keep going. He made us go out there. We froze our feet, and then we had another outdoor rink about 2 blocks away, which was a larger ice surface, and he used to drag us all there, and that's what we did. And we played, and we played, and we played, and we grew up, and that was part of it. So my father got us started, and a lot of times that's all you need is you need a start, you need a push from somebody, right? And then it just became our life. And so I was able to go through all the different levels of play in Hibbing, and had some great coaches, won a state championship, which was like winning a high school basketball championship in Indiana. And it was because of these people that kind of kept us going and didn't think about it much. Because we won the state championship, I got a call and a request for a visit from a guy named Herb Brooks, who just happened to be the head coach at the University of Minnesota. So he set up a time to come to Hibbing and visit with us. He rings the doorbell, we meet, he says to me, please go in another room, I want to talk to your parents. I wait in the kitchen for an hour, he comes back in, I'll talk to you soon, see you later. That was my first meeting with Herb. As it turns out, he became like a son to my parents. He became like a brother to my brothers and sisters, and became something special, obviously, to me. I didn't know it right away, because after my freshman year, when I did get drafted by the Montreal Canadiens in 1974, I got a call from Herb's secretary that he wanted to meet with me in his office. So I walk into his office, and Herb says, I just wanted to let you know that you were drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, but don't worry about it, you'll never turn pro. See you later. And as we all found out from 1980 on, his ability to read people and to get the best out of people, I learned early from her, and had to prove him wrong, which I did. Then, as Sam was saying, I did get a chance to play for Glenn Sather in Edmonton, but then he told me I wanted too much money, so he traded me. And my biggest break in my life came in 1981 when I was playing for St. Louis. And I met a girl who didn't know anything about hockey. And she's been my wife for almost 44 years. And I wouldn't be up here without her, because I've been traveling for 44 years. And a little bit before that, before we were married. But she unselfishly said, do what you have to do. I'll take care of the kids, which she did, up and down the East Coast with them playing hockey and basketball. And I was on the road, and she was doing this. And then when I was home, we couldn't watch any of the great shows that were on all the different channels, HBO, you name it, because I had to watch a hockey game. And that was our life. She allowed me to do that. I tried as hard as I could. She made sure the kids were taken care of, and I was there when I could be. And so I wouldn't be up here without Kathy. Thank you. My biggest break in my broadcast career came when I finished playing. I got licensed to sell stocks and bonds with a company called E.F. Hutton back in the early 80s. The great Dan Kelly, who Sam talked about and a lot of other people talked about, was the voice of the NHL. And I know Bruce mentioned that he didn't get the picture of Bobby Orr flying through the air when they won the Stanley Cup. But Dan Kelly, if you listen to it, that's Dan Kelly's voice that's making the call. So Dan also happened to be the play-by-play voice of the St. Louis Blues. And he became a client of mine. I didn't actually know Dan all that well, even though when we played there wasn't the same kind of relationship that broadcasters now have with players. And so, but Dan called me out of the blue one day. He said, buy me 500 shares of that. I said, bullshit. I said, okay. So, the following August, Dan calls me. He says, listen, he says, I need somebody to be my analyst on radio. He says, you're not going to make any money. But he said, I think you can do it. I think we'll have some fun. And I'll get you back in the game. And it'll help your business. Why don't you think about doing it? So we have a game to do in 3 weeks. And it was a preseason game. So I talked it over with Kathy, and of course there was going to be some travel. And so I said, okay, great. And he was right about the money. So he said to me, he said, listen, I know you've never done this, but we'll get together before the first game and we'll talk about how the business works and how broadcasting works. So I said, okay, great. Well, that never happened. So the first game that I worked with Dan was a preseason game, St. Louis and Detroit in Peoria, Illinois. So Dan had a patented goal call. And so 7 minutes into the game, the Blues score. Dan starts in with his patented call. And I say something in the middle of his call. And he looks at me, and he sends it to commercial. And he says, if you ever do that again, you're fired. I said, what'd I do? He says, don't ever talk when I'm talking. I said, got it. And that was the start. And Dan was so good and professional at what he did. And he sent me a message that if you want to do this, people don't want to just hear that you played the game. They want to hear when I played. You want to learn how to do this, you want to make it a profession, then this is what you have to do. And Dan had, we had some real interesting times. on the road, we used to go out after every game, order a beer, and then he'd give me a critique. And I'll never forget when we were in New Jersey, early in the career, we went out, went through the same thing, and Dan says to me, "Boy, you really embarrassed yourself tonight." And I said, "I did." He said, "You did." I said, "How'd I do that?" And he told me. He said, "When I asked you about this player in the first period, you gave me nothing. When I asked about their power play in the second period, you gave me nothing. You have to know that's how this job is done." I said, "Okay." Another game in Toronto, we went out after the game and did the same thing, had a beer, relaxed. And he said, "Boy, we were effing good tonight." And I said, "We were?" And he said, "We were effing good tonight." I said, "Why?" And he told me. He says, "The first period," says, "I mentioned this, bang," he said, "You were right on. Second period, this, you're right." So that's how I learned the business, because he cared so much about me. And God rest his soul. We lost him at age 54 to cancer. But he was the reason that I got into this business. And from that point forward, I just kept getting, it's like you said, don't talk about it. These are the things that happened to me that got me to here tonight. And while I was still selling stocks and bonds, I got a call in the fall of 1993 from a guy named Don McGuire, who was the executive producer of TNT Sports. And he said to me, "Joe, my name's Don McGuire. I want to hire you to the Winter Olympics in Lillehammer." I said, "Who is this?" And I hung up because I thought it was one of my buddies pulling a fast one. He called back and says, "Don't hang up." And went on to tell me that not only did he see my work, but he talked to other people. And I want to hire you and Jigs McDonald to do the games. And it was one of the greatest 2+ weeks of my career working with the great Jigs McDonald. And I learned so much, not only about broadcasting in the game, but off the ice. I couldn't keep up with you, but I tried. And Jigs meant so much to me, and you're so important to my career. And then, as Sam was talking to Dave, we got hired to do Fox. I got to know Sam more, better, working with him. Got to know Dave as well, who was doing all the studio work, and that's the first time Dave and I really got to start to know each other. We played against each other. And then a guy by the name of Joe Cohen, who is one of the nicest people that this business has ever known, reached out and offered me the opportunity to come to New York in '98, of which I didn't. I didn't know anything about New York or Long Island or anything else, but I got to work with Howie Rose, who was my first partner, and just a fabulous broadcaster, tremendous person, and the guy who's sitting in the back right there, Kevin Meininger, was my first producer with the Islanders back 27 years ago, was here tonight and is now one of our bosses. Sitting next to him is Chris Ebert, another one of our longtime producers with the Rangers, so I appreciate you guys being here. You've meant so much to my career. And so, that started this opportunity in New York. And then when 2006 came along, and as Sam mentioned, JD decided to move on to St. Louis and become an executive there. And now they had to fill his role. And I want to tell you a little something about Dave Maloney. So I didn't really know it as much at the time, because they were talking to me about doing this, but I didn't know that they were also talking to Dave about filling that role. And, you know, here's somebody, youngest captain in history, great career with the Rangers. And I thought about it later on how much that would have meant to him to get that job. I got the job. And he became one of my great friends. Not once was he ever bitter towards me. The complete opposite. He embraced me. What do you need? How can I help? We were new in New York, you know, especially with the Rangers. And Dave, I'll never forget that. And that's the character that Sam was talking about. I'm so happy for you. You and Kenny are going to be fantastic. So I appreciate that. And then 19 years with Sam. 40 years the face of Rangers television. I mean, who does that? Right? And the thing about Sam, and there's a lot of things I can talk about Sam, but he never took a game off. He was our heartbeat to our shows, every game. He showed up prepared, showed up with a smile on his face, showed up with enthusiasm, showed up with love for the game. And when he talks about people that have relationships in this sport, nobody has more relationships than him. And it showed this past year, the love that he got from teams and players and management and owners and you name it. And Sam, when I stand up here and look around, and I think, if there is a singular reason for me being here, it's you. And I thank you. My career advice would be, start with a Hall of Famer, work with more Hall of Famers like Jigs along the way, finish with a Hall of Famer, and then enjoy the rest of your life with your wife, our 2 kids, Adam and Allison, and our 6 grandkids, which is what I'm going to do. Thank you so much.